Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Some interesting email before, after the 1 p.m. lesson, in reference to the jazz time, swing straight up and down, and the dotted eighth note. So we're going to kind of explore that a little tonight. Plus, we're going to work out of the syncopation book and the stick control book. One of the questions, and I'm sure that most of you gentlemen, this is actually one of the editions of Jim Chapin's Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer. And the first publication was in 1948. Mercy, Lord be. So I guess he's old school, huh? Not really, but great book. And who knows how many he sold of these. And he did a great job at that time. You know, and the reason why this was one of the best-selling drum books was because of the fact of the graphics. Now the graphics, he goes through things like this. Okay, if you can see that, I mean, I don't know if you can see stuff like this. There you go. All right. All right, now, it's the graphics, but in my opinion, as time progressed and I started to develop a sense of the jazz time, my opinion, and I'm not going to be condescending to Jim Chapin. Jim Chapin was a sweetheart of a guy, a great instructor, and he had passion about teaching like I have not seen anyone. How you doing, Ed? How you doing, Jim? All right, now, the question was, one of the members is an instructor like you are, Ed, and he was teaching a jazz time, and he was talking about the dotted eighth note and the straight up and down eighth note swung. Now there is a difference at a slow point, and what I was always told was, for example, if I did, how you doing, Joe? If I did the dotted quarter note, which would be 1 E and 2 E and, I'm going to try it here, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. Now, that's only good for certain things unless you want to get into polyrhythms. For example, if I did quarter notes, and I was always told to use that in a ballad. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. Now it's not like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now I don't want to put this book down. I went through this, it was very painful. Oh, and it was difficult for me at the time, but the graphics really made it a lot easier. But in my opinion, and I don't want to be, like I said, condescending, the book don't swing. All right? That's my opinion, and that's not belittling Mr. Chapin. All right? He was a great instructor, passionate, second to none for instructing. Anyway, let's talk about the difference between the triplet, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Well, I'm doing the tempo about here. It's really it's not modified. You could really hear the difference. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now, if I do the 16th, dotted eighth note, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and the 3 E and the 4, the 1. That doesn't sound like there is a difference. For example, if I'm playing 1E and the 2E and the 3, I can play 16ths. If I'm playing triplets, that opens the string up. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, just the difference. If I'm playing fast, you can't really hear it except for the left hand, and anybody can play 16ths at that tempo with the left hand. God bless them. Okay, do we have any questions on something like that? Because that was presented to me today. I don't think about a jazz pattern as a dotted eighth note. I think about it in the triplet formation. It swings, it opens it up, and to me it sounds a whole lot better. Any questions on that? Ed, do you have any issues with that? I mean, you know, I'm sure that you teach the straight ahead jazz pattern. Do you use the dotted quarter note or you use the triplet? And it makes for a good discussion because there is a difference. Hello, 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 hello. Gentlemen, the more questions, the merrier. I know there's a delay. What is this now? That's exactly what I say, Pete. And that was a good, this is a good discussion that you presented in my email. And you think triplets, Ed? Nah, man, the triplets opens it up, just like Pete just said. Ding, jong, ding, ding. Now, it does sound like that's a good term, crush. 1E and the 2E and the 3. 4E and the 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 4. I use it for slower tempos. I might think that way to get a different feel with the, say, play eighth notes with the left hand or 16th notes with the left hand. Like I said, I'm not being condescending to Mr. Chapin. Mr. Chapin, most definitely a sweetheart of a man, a great educator, and he has contributed to the drum community like, you know, unbelievable. The man, I met him a few times. As a matter of fact, way back in the 70s, I was purchasing these books from him. He was at the Long Island Drum Center. I was getting him wholesale. I buy 30, 40 books at a time. And he was a sweetheart of a guy. Okay. Anyway, I prefer thinking triplets because it swings, it opens it up. For example, if I'm going to take the syncopation book. And I don't have the jacket, it's on the floor, sorry. If everybody could get the syncopation book, and let's go to, okay, page 38. You guys have that syncopation book, page 38? And I think triplets. Ding, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And I'm playing a straight ahead time. I'm not playing an open time. You know, I'm not playing melodically. I'm playing ba-ding. If I'm back in a singer, if you're back in a singer and you start playing open time, they're going to look at you and say, goodbye. You know, you're giving her a platform or him a platform. Ding, do, dee, bom, ding, do. Keeping everybody together. I'm thinking triplets. You think triplets. You do most definitely play that. And thank you, Peter. I didn't copy and paste. I'm not copying and pasting your resume, but I will. Perhaps tomorrow sometime. But anyway, let's go to page 38. Everybody have the syncopation book? If you don't have the syncopation book, we'll use the stick control book. Yes, no. Let me know if you have the syncopation book in front of you, if you have the stick control book. Jim? Joe? Pete? Ed? Man, it's starting to get so populated, I'm going to forget names, and I apologize for that. All right. Now let me play it safe and use the stick control book. Okay, how's that sound, gentlemen? I have it over there. I have nightmares about that book at times. Okay, what I want to let's do the syncopation book if you have it. We're on page 38. Straight up and down. Good, Pete. You have it? All right, so we have two. We're on page 38. Now, let's take this. We're not going to approach this right now as if you were a seasoned player, and I'm not belittling anybody because I know there's quite a few seasoned players in this audience. Okay, now, we're on page 38. Now remember, this is the second edition, so it's exercise 1. Now, let's approach this as you're an instructor, and you're in a music store or you have your own studio, and you get somebody 15, 14, 13, knows how to read this straight up and down. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Good, they know how to read it. So now you play against the jazz time. So now, you say you have to, yeah, all right, everybody has it. Good for you guys. All right, so you say to the young man, well, you learn how to read it, you know how to do it. So let's swing it, and you explain. You give the explanation of the swing. I go into a triplet platform, 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4 and the. So I say, okay, we're going to play the jazz pattern straight ahead, not open but straight. Now that doesn't sound stiff because you need to play this pattern first before you can open it up. That's a straight ahead standard jazz pattern. I'm thinking 1 and the 2 and the 3, 4. Okay. Now you explain how to swing the line, that all the ands become the duh of the triplet, all the downbeats are the first note of the triplet. So I go to line, the first 2 measures of exercise number 1. So I'm playing 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4. 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4. Okay, so now you're playing this. 1 and the 2 and the 3, 4. 1, 4. 1 and the 2 and the 3. Here you go. 1. Simple. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You teach them how to read it mathematically, and eventually they're going to hum it as, say, the band hitting it that way, or maybe the trumpets hitting it that way, so on and so forth. What I like to do with this is I play these as triplets. It's very stiff if I play it 1E and the 2E and the 3 and the 4. 1E and the 2E and the 3 and the 4. It's very, very stiff. So I play the triplet formation. So what I came across one time, and I use it as well, is the Alan Dawson concept. We all know who Alan Dawson is, right? For you gentlemen who don't know, when the original Brubeck Quartet disbanded, Alan Dawson took over Joe Morello's chair. And beside that, Alan Dawson was the head of the percussion department at Berklee School of Music in Boston. And Alan Dawson, man, he had this one book, the Rudimental Ritual. I'm still having trouble with that. That's a difficult book. But he come up with a concept. If you look at a page like this, and he refers to an eighth note as the short note and the quarter note as the long note. Have you ever heard of that concept, gentlemen? Long note, short note. And he would play all the short notes on the snare, all the long notes, which are the quarter notes, on the bass drum. So if I swung the first measure, 1, the 2, the 3, 4, Do we see that? That's Alan Dawson's concept. 1 and the 2 and the 3, 4. 1 and the 2 and the 3, 4. Hello. Have you ever heard of that concept? Long notes, bass drum, or vice versa, and eighth notes, short notes. Okay. No response. Everybody's trying that. It's a different way of thinking. It's a little bit difficult, and it's mathematical as well. What I like to do is take something like this. First, I start with the stick control book, but I'm going to do it with this thing. Let's do it with the stick control book first because it's a little bit easier. It's the triplet fill-ins. You heard of that, right, Ed? Okay. Well, you're from the area. You never heard of it? Now you did. You haven't either, right, Joe? How you doing, Tim? This is your first time here? Anyway. Yeah, well, a lot of drummers that went through that school of Alan Dawson, and I believe Carl Allen did study with Alan Dawson. Alan Dawson was a marvelous teacher and player. And there's long notes, short note, and he comes up with paradiddles. We could do this in paradiddles. You know, just a variety of ways of approaching or interpreting the stick control book or the syncopation book or any reading text that you do. For example, let's, when I refer to the first line, for example, of stick control book, we're going to swing the line on a snare drum. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and Now, what I like to do with that, I'd like to use a triplet fill-in. Now, you were here, Ed, and I believe you also, Joe. James, you weren't, and Tim and Pete, you were not here for that. So, well, subscribe to it, Tim, and it will tell you and notify you when we're doing live lessons. I've been doing live lessons on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. But anyway, well, that's okay. You know, you're self-taught. Now, you know, you're learning the language. You're learning different approaches and different concepts, and hopefully you're growing. So anyway, triplet fills. I can consider this a linear line. I'm going to think eighth note triplets, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm going to take the first line of page 5 of the stick control book and just play the rights. But I'm thinking triplets, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and okay? Now I want to fill in. The triplet. So to make it linear, linear means a straight line of rhythm. I just played 4 quarter notes, which is a linear line. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and linear means no two voices hit at the same time, and it's a straight line of rhythm. If I played 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that's not a linear line. It's a broken line of rhythm. So now we go back to line 1, which is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2. So I want to fill in the blank. I want to make it a straight line of eighth note triplets. So I'm going to still play the rights as 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and I'm going to take my left hand and play the balance of the triplet. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a linear line. Now, we go to line 2, the right falls on the does of the triplet. So we go to line 2, we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm going to make it a linear line of an eighth note triplet. So we're going to have 1 and 2 and Do we understand this so far, gentlemen? I'm going to play line 1 and line 2 as linear. Do we understand that? Before I go any further, because we're going to go against the jazz time with this. This is why I think this concept is a lot better than what I first learned. Gentlemen, please. You understand it, Tim? Okay. All right, so now, we'll take line number 1. And this is in the workbook number 2, because we're going to do linear lines and jazz lines and stick control formulas. It's going to be a bigger book than the first one. Okay, and it's part of, you understand that, Joe? Tim understands it. Okay, so the next step, instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to do a substitution. Instead of playing the right hand, we're going to play the bass drum. You get it? 1 and 2, 3, 4. It's it's essential you count the triplet. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and all right. Now we go to the second line. I'm only using one voice per note. So we have, the second line would be 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and Now, line 3. Now let me just do line 1 and line 2 against this pattern. And that's no longer linear, it's a jazz independence. My right hand is thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. My left foot 2 and 4. No bass drum and snare drum yet. 1 and 2 and 3. Look at the right hand. Free stroke, down, a free stroke, down, free stroke, down, a bang. Now I'm going to do line 1 like we just demonstrated between the bass drum and snare drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. We're going to go to line 2. Look at that right hand. Free stroke, down, a free stroke, down, free stroke, then line 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We understand it, gentlemen? Line 1 and line 2. Now we're going to go to line 3. All right, line 3, you have the rights is going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the first movement is to make it linear. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we got it? I just moved it around the drums. Just have it flipping out a little bit. So now we're making it 1 and 2 and Now the next movement is, okay, was that yes sir? It's yes Matt, man, come on, don't make me sound like some sort of general. All right, anyway, we make line 3 now, the substitution. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And we played against the jazz time. Nice and slow. Line 3, 2, 3, 4. We got it, right, gentlemen? No questions? I'm going to take this up to line 5, then I'll go back to the syncopation book. All right, line 4, what you have now is the rights fall on the 2 and 4 and. So I have, and I'm going to swing it, so I have 1 and 2 and and the 4 and the 1 and the 2, 3, 4. Substitution. Okay. You got 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4 and the. You understand it. I'm going to have this written out in that workbook. It's going to take a while to put that workbook together because, like I said, it's going to be a lot bigger, and it's going to actually save me a lot of time. At first, it's going to take about a month. After the holiday season, we'll have the book prepared, and the printer where I'm going, the store which I'm going to charges too much money for double-sided. So I've been doing some research on almost what's the problem. We all have to work on it, James. Let me here before I forget, which I will. This is for Tim. I'm gonna put my email in here. Email me, okay? Oh, what did I do? Email me, Tim. And no, that's 1001. I apologize. It's Matt. I'm sorry. I can't see. I'm old. There you go. That's my email, Tim. After the lesson, email me. I'll put you on the mailing list, and we'll get something going on. Well, I'm not looking for that. What I'm going to do, James, is I'm going to put I'm going to rent rather a high-speed printer. And I'm going to print them all out here. I will take them to the printer and he will bind them. All right, well, that's okay. I'm going to give you a call one day, Jim, if you're available, okay? I do have your phone number, if you don't mind. Anyway, thank you for purchasing an additional workbook. That was very nice of you. And I guess you want the other one coming soon. But anyway, we all understand line 1 through 4, no? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hang out with line 1 through 5. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play them as not a linear concept, but I'm going to move them around the drum set. Okay? I'm going to use the tom-toms. So I get... We got that, guys? How did I meet Morello? Well, all right, let me tell you the story then. When I was a kid, I actually started teaching before I went into the service. And I was going to students' homes. And I really I didn't study with anybody famous. I just the local drum teachers in the area. So I went into the service. I was in the Army band for 2 years. I get out of the service and I decided, let me get a teacher. So, and I also got a job. What is this job? Teaching in a music store. And the music store is not there anymore. This is going about 40 years ago. And when the music store first opened, it was a nice place. There was another drum teacher coming from New York City. And I figured, well, the guy from New York, man, he's going to be great. And he worked in the Adler building, and he was a teacher in the Adler building. His name was Charlie Tappan, a sweetheart of a guy. And, you know, he's an older guy. He had a drinking problem, I guess. But one thing that man did teach me was how to read and read well. Technique, I had to run away from the guy. So what I did after I took a few lessons from him, I went to another local teacher. Well, he wasn't local. He was a couple cities or counties away from where I was teaching. His name was Carl Wolf. He's passed since. And I went to Carl Wolf because I always wanted to go to this guy ever since I was a kid. So I went to him. I took one, well, actually, I went to him for one lesson. I went back for the second lesson. And he goes, what the hell do you want with me? He goes, why don't you go see Morello? Okay. Now, he was a former student of Joe's. So he gave me the contact with Joe Morello. And I didn't know that Joe Morello, at that time, he lived in New Jersey. And he was teaching a couple towns away from Carl, which was in Union, New Jersey. And I called Morello up, and I was a little kid, man. I mean, kid, 25, 26, whatever I was. I don't remember. And I called him up, and I give him a little bit of my credentials. You know, I'm playing 6 nights a week. I have 88 students, blah, blah, blah. And his response to that, he goes, well, maybe I should study with you. You know, 6 nights a week, 88 students. And since that phone call, there was a friendship that evolved. Okay. So way back then, Joe was charging $20 a lesson. So I made my first appointment. I went to the music store, which was, well, it wasn't a music store. What it was a company who supplied all the instruments to the schools. And they were a place where they would refurbish or repair the instruments and so on and so forth. And Joe, on the second floor, had a studio where he taught, plus a warm-up room. And in that warm-up room, I'll tell you, I met a lot of great drummers. You know, Vinny Colaiuta, Danny Gottlieb, a whole lot of drummers. Anyway, that's how I first came to Morello. Now, I take a lesson from him. The first lesson, I sit there. I was a nervous wreck. Here's Joe Morello, man. You know, I was in high school listening to Take 5. I said, whoa, check this guy out. Man, what a great drummer this guy is. And I, you know, #1 in Downbeat, #1 in Playboy, 5 years in a row. Buddy Rich was buried #7. He was #1. Like that meant anything. Well, it did at the time. So I'm sitting there, and he is to my right side, and I'm sitting here, and we have 2 drum pads. And back then we had the Ludwig drum pad. It was it has drum skin on it. It was a good drum pad. And in front of us, there was a mirror. Now, on the mirror, there was 3 lines. There was, and I didn't know what they were, 4, but I finally found out what was the half stroke, the quarter stroke, and the full stroke. Now, he'd asked me to play a couple things for him, like the paradiddle, doubles, you know, whatever I could play from whatever he asked if I could play it. So he has the sticks in his hands, and he starts to play doubles. Let me tell you something. I never heard doubles like that in all my life, and I've been around a lot of drummers at that point in my life. And I thought the lesson was going to be for an hour. My first lesson was about 4 hours. I canceled everything. I'm with the great Joe Morello. I'm taking a 4-hour drum lesson. He explained so many things to me in one lesson. So he had kind of a free day that day, and we went across the street after the lesson, which was a bar. We had a sandwich, and we had a few drinks. Well, I'm not really a good drinker, and I don't really drink. But Joe Morello could pound them, man. He could put them away. Double shots of CC and a Heineken. And he must have put about 10, 20 of them away. Well, at that point, I was getting a whole lot of tipsy, and I was going to drive home. And he says, no. Now imagine this, here's a guy who's blind, just about, considered blind legally, and I'm not walking out of the place, I'm being taken out of the place over Joe Morello's shoulders. And he put me in my car, and I slept it off. But that's my first time with Joe Morello. That's how I met Joe. And then I called back and I apologized to him, and I did a couple more lessons, and I must have, for the first 6 months, every week a lesson. But then, I was with a traveling band. We'd travel all over the United States, and when I did come back into town, I would take some lessons from him. Well, that's like 2 months worth of lessons in today's day and age with the legends. Well, every lesson was a great lesson with Joe. And I explained to you guys the best lesson I ever had with Joe is when he would come and see me play. And that was intimidating. And I don't want to go into it again. Believe it or not, he would tell me some stories, man, about these other drummers. He got to a point where he got a C&I dog. Now, the C&I dog, believe it or not, he named after me, Matthew. I thought that was, I'm named after a dog. He names a dog after me. But it's something that's very nice, I believe. And ever since then, man, we had developed a good friendship. And he was like that with most of his students. He was very friendly, down to earth, always humble. And as a matter of fact, in February, I'm not sure of the date yet, but I'm going to have Alan Herman here. I'm going to have Jeffrey Johnson and Steve Forrester, who are former students of Joe. And we're all going to sit down and we're going to talk about our stories with Joe, plus what he opened up for us technically and musically, plus we're going to go over the books. Now, I come down from getting these guys together sometime in February. Now, Alan and I is okay. I got with any date, so I got to come with Jeffrey Johnson and Steve Forrester, a date where I could put them all together. I don't know if a good weekend, on a weekend or a weekday or a week evening or whatever, would be fine. But that's going to be a very interesting get together, like a round table. There's not going to be a whole lot of playing. There might be. It depends on where we take it. But we're also going to have Jeffrey Johnson do, by himself and with me, a additional broadcast explaining his level system, his publication. Man, that guy, he did a fantastic job. And this afternoon we talked about, grace notes and ghost notes and the language and how it gets all confusing. Even it was told some people call grace notes ghost notes. I mean, that's to me, that's confusing the whole language. The language of drumming should be universal. Like I talked about the rough as opposed to a single 5 instead of a 5-stroke rough. It changes. It gets everybody confused. But he did a great job with dynamics. Great musician. And how the levels come into view. Okay? Joe would always listen to everything there, Tim. I mean, he liked big band. He loved John Coltrane and Miles Davis. He really did. And he listened to mostly everything. He wouldn't listen to, the bebop. Not the bebop, I'm sorry. The doo-wop. Think about this. We're talking 1961, 1962. And this is before I studied with Joe. I was in high school. And there was a place where I would go to every afternoon for lunch. And back then they had a jukebox, the big one. You put a quarter and you get 3 plays. Well, I would play Take 5 3 times. And what they had was, back then, FM radio was considered underground. So the only thing that you could get if you didn't want to go underground was AM. And there was a station I would listen to, WABC AM. And every night they would play the top 40. Here comes the top 5. There's Kathy's Clown, Chubby Checker's Twist, whatever it was, The Lion Sleeps Tonight, number 2. Number 1, Take 5. Ha! Go figure. Great tune, classic. And unfortunately today it's elevator music because of where music went. And that's okay, it's part of the journey. What is this? Well, he just loved everybody. He respected everybody there, Tim. And I'll tell you one thing about Joe. He would not bash anybody. He'd just tell you how he felt and the truth. You know, and hey, you could take that any way you want. But anyway, tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to be working on the Joe Morello Master Studies. Okay, we're going to demonstrate that on the drum pad. Okay, Ed? And we're going to use the control strokes or the levels, maybe 1 through 5. Maybe we'll go to the Stone Killer or the Table of Time. Hey, Jason. Is this your first time here, Jason? Welcome, if it is. Welcome, everybody's welcome. What I need for you to do, Jason, if you're going to frequent this, it's on Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. and 9 p.m. And you should get on my mailing list. I'll put my email in again. Well, you have to understand something. The question here, or the remark. Well, email me and I'll send you, put you on my mailing list and tell you what the agenda is, and I'll send you some PDFs. And subscribe to the channel. The channel will give you notification when I'm on. What did he think of Jason? I mean, John Bottom. You know, you have to understand, you know, back then, there was jazz, and then Take 5 was considered progressive jazz. What's progressive? Means just moving on to another zone, whatever. And Jason Bottom was rock. Now, I couldn't see Joe Morello playing with Led Zeppelin, nor can I see Jason Bottom, not Jason, that's his son, John Bottom playing with Brubeck. Great drummers, but different. That's all. Simple. Like I said this afternoon, the term I get, who do you think is a better drummer? Buddy Rich or Max Roach? Well, you know what? That's a very immature question. There is nobody better than anyone else. We are all in a different place. We all have our different voice, our different styles, and we like to play different musics, okay? But we're all on the same journey, however, to become better. So, and we're you know, some guys been playing 100 years, some guys been playing 2 years, 10 years, whatever. They're self-taught. Maybe they have a teacher for 10 years, who knows? But we're all the same. We're all created equal. There's nobody better than anybody else. I get this shit. Who's the fastest drummer in the world? Who cares? Do you care? Who's the fastest drummer in the world? What does that mean? I have guys come to me, put the metronome on an unbelievable tempo and play singles for 10 minutes. I put them on a drum set, they don't know what to do. Because all they do is practice singles. What is that sense of that? Don't make no sense. I'm getting some more remarks. Thank you, Pete. we're all created equal, man. You know, I had this one guy. He's not my friend anymore because I dislike his teacher. And there are some drummers that I really dislike, but I stay away from them. But they comment, and after a while, they catch me in a bad mood, and they piss me off, and I'm going to drop them. Here's what happens with this. When somebody lies about who they perform with for a certain period of time, which was untrue, and they only played one night and were released because it wasn't a good fit, but they capitalize off the fact they played with this person for 2 years, which is totally bullshit. That pisses me off. And when you have guys giving out some bad information, I leave it alone because, that's their approach that works for them. But when they start dropping it on me, I give it right back to them, big time. I've had one of these ambassador of the drum world call me up 3 times, 4 times in one day because he was pissed because I was saying things about him which were the truth. And he knew it. But anyway, that's irrelevant. That's the kind of guys that piss me off. All right, guys, listen. It's 7:45 I wish I could stay more, but I will be back with Joe Morello's Master Studies tomorrow. I'm going to write out the first 5 exercises and the table of time. All right, and email it to everybody, and we'll work on those 2 pages with the levels, with the metronome, and it's difficult. But you have to do what you have to do to go forward. Okay, gentlemen, no questions, no problems. Oh, James, your person that sent me the money for the book sent it to me not as a gift. All right, the lessons every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. on this channel. Got it there, Tim? And email me. Let me know a little bit about yourself. Mr. Peter there, man, he's got some resume going on. He's going to help out here. And that's good, man. Right, thank you, Pete. See what I mean? Now, there's quite a few guys who haven't been coming to the lesson because their schedule doesn't permit it, but they do come when they come. Like, I have a guy who just moved from Virginia to Washington, D.C. I have 2 guys, as a matter of fact, in Florida who haven't come, and Paul. Okay? So, with all of this being said, I need to leave. There's no questions. And we'll review what we did tonight somehow tomorrow. And I'm doing a drum pad lesson again. Okay, there, Ed, a drum pad lesson. You like that view, correct? With the Morello book. All right. Why? I'm not embarrassing you. No blushing in public there, Pete. You have a good resume, man. You worked hard. That's fine. All right. Anyway, need to sign off. See everybody tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m. Okay, gentlemen?